I'd say my main focus and what I try help people with is kind of turn the science into practical application with an emphasis on the practical part. The weight training a couple times a week, it's hard to give specific recommendations if the goal is just general health. You could probably say, 60 to 90 minutes total per week would probably be sufficient. You're not going to become a bodybuilder by doing that. If we didn't eat meat, we would be healthier. If you ate a plant-based diet only, it would be healthier. A lot of people wouldn't agree with me. There's a lot of people who would agree. I'm not a vegan, and I had beef for lunch, right? So I don't always do what I know is best because I'm human and I have preferences and things like that.
Adam McDonald, bodybuilder, he holds an MSc in nutrition. So everyone knows their own story, and I would like to hear your story. So how did you get here? And I mean it in the broadest possible sense. Well, yeah, the story of your life.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm from Ireland and I live here still. And I always had an interest in like health and fitness throughout my life, but played basketball when I was younger. And then I kind of just follow the regular path that you're expected, or at least in my culture, you're expected to do, which is go to university, get a decently paying job, and kind of just be happy enough with that. And I kind of did that, and I studied business and got a job, an internship, and had a career that would put me on a good trajectory financially if I stuck it out. But I could never really enjoy it. It wasn't very stimulating for me, I would say. And then I actually opened up a gym then with a friend. So I was really into the fitness and always wanted to be a fitness model, whatever that means. And thought that I could make a career out of that. But that was when I was like a teenager. I had no idea of what that actually meant, other than just like people look up to you. And I kind of quickly realized that that isn't really a career path. And so I opened up a gym with a friend for a few years, and it was tough. I realized I don't really like working with individuals in the gym setting. It was very monotonous and repetitive, and a lot of people I felt didn't necessarily want to be there, and that wasn't very fulfilling as well. So I actually went back into the same industry I used to work in for a few years. And then I started to get more into the academic side of things. So I was like, I don't want to pursue this nutrition side of things, and found it very difficult to get back into a program because I couldn't give up 4 years again of my life to do a bachelor's or undergraduate because I needed to make money. So I found eventually the university that led me to do a master's, and I swapped over then to another university halfway through that one. And I really enjoyed it. And then I kind of got into the coaching space from experiences that I had working with coaches as a client myself in the bodybuilding world. And it kind of naturally, one thing led to another. And it's kind of how I ended up here now, which is what I do full time.
Did you compete in bodybuilding?
Yeah, I competed first in fitness modeling, which was kind of like bodybuilding, but you don't wear the bodybuilding trunks, as my friends call it, a G string. But you wear like
Tell me about that. What do you mean? I don't know anything about
sure,
fitness modeling and
I
bodybuilding.
gotcha.
What's the difference?
Bodybuilding, you wear like a banana hammock, they call it. It's like a underpants sort of thing, right? And my friends, they make fun of me, right, that they aren't into the bodybuilding because it's like a women's underwear. And but the fitness modeling, maybe you wear like a more of a shorts like kind of thing. There wasn't any natural bodybuilding in Ireland when I was younger. It was only
But
untested.
fitness modeling is a competition.
Yeah, yeah. So you do like
Yeah.
it's basically like bodybuilding, but they call it fitness modeling. So you're not doing
Mhm.
these flexing poses and things like that. You're just more like a natural, almost like a catwalk. Seems a little
Okay.
bit cringy now, to be honest. I got into that, and then I really love the lifting side of things, and I fell in love with that. And natural bodybuilding became something that opened up in Ireland now. And so I did compete in that then a few years later. And then a few years after that, I competed again. But I haven't actually competed in natural bodybuilding now since before the whole pandemic. So it's been something that is a huge commitment, time wise and just energy wise. So I haven't actually got on stage in a couple of years now at this stage.
Why does it feel cringy for you?
It's a good question. But it's not really about the art of the bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding. It seems more about the art and sculpture of the physique, and more of a like a mastery thing in my perspective, of course. But the fitness modeling seemed more of a just look at me. Everyone trying to. It's just more on your physical, natural genetics and looks, and that's why I kind of felt like the bodybuilding is less on your physical appearance, is judging people on their it is obviously appearance, but it's not on like what you are given by God or your genetics, rather more so what you have built. That's what it's actually hard for me to kind of put into words, but that's what kind of what I felt.
Perhaps it has more to do with the people you are in the same tribe with right now. Perhaps they would call it cringy. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but can I ask a question? I had this thinking about bodybuilding as a sport itself. Where did it, well, not fail, but let's use that word for now, failed. In every sport, in every game, you need to have a goal. And the goals of bodybuilding were more muscle, less fat. But there is this notion in game philosophy is that called value capture, where the goal of the game overtakes your entire life. Something like this, I believe, happened from probably when Arnold and others started to do the bodybuilding stuff, and now we ended up in a monster era of bodybuilding because we get just way too good at having more muscle and less fat to the point of not just impracticality, unhealthiness. Did you ever think about it this way?
That it's getting too good.
Yeah, the bodybuilders are getting too good, and the sport is losing its way. So now, what did they have to figure out? They have to bring in newer categories like, I believe, men's physique and whatnot. Perhaps fitness modeling
Mm,
created because of the monster era of bodybuilding got too good at building too much
sure.
muscles. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I think that was the original goal of the men's physique category that they brought in, where they wear the board shorts, because the mainstream bodybuilding was no longer appealing to people in general. It wasn't inspiring them to get involved because people were they were just massive, right? Lots of anabolics and huge human beings, and it was losing its public and mass appeal. And then so they brought in these other categories, which again the problem is that they just reward the size, and now even those guys are now becoming huge, where it's actually that itself is losing its appeal. So even in the last few years, they've also brought in something called classic physique. I don't know, you may have heard of someone called Chris Bumstead. Yes, like very popular, and that's because they're trying to get back to maybe what it was like in the 1970s, 1980s, where it seemed more attainable. Although in reality, it still probably wasn't very attainable because genetics, and also still there was pharmacology involved that people maybe weren't aware. But that's, I do think that is one of the reasons why maybe bodybuilding isn't as popular as it was back 30 years ago, when the Mr. Olympia show was on national TV, and uh, the bodybuilding shows were actually, the Mr. Olympia was actually held around different parts of Europe. Maybe I'm wrong on that specific fact, but they had professional shows at least in different parts of Europe, in Sweden and Germany and Spain and Czech Republic, and they still do, but they're a lot smaller now. Where you had the big named competitors like Ronnie Coleman and all of these guys going to these shows and competing, where it doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah, and then what's going on right now? Because the the gym bro culture has been replaced by a different kind of species of animals like Andrew Huberman. I don't even know how would you categorize Joe Rogan, right? These people. What's the difference here? They are not. They are different from the old gym bro science stuff, but somewhat of an evolution of them.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, like I would consider them maybe like health optimization, um, rather than like specifically like the bodybuilding or muscle building, although that is an element of it. And I think that definitely is becoming more popular. Why specifically? Um, I'm not sure. I think maybe people don't have as much challenges and struggles in their lives as they did maybe 50 years ago when there was more poverty, and so we need something to worry about. And with the more access of the internet and social media now, all this information is accessible to everybody. So we see a rise in these sort of things. I don't have any statistics on it, but it seems like people becoming a lot more health conscious and trying to take things into their own hands themselves, and maybe distrust in the traditional sources of information, as in like your doctor or your teachers, in maybe in older times, even the church or the religious side of things. And now people are kind of seem to be making decisions more on themselves and just kind of quote unquote doing research for themselves.
Yeah, right. Back in the day, it was much different. Right now, you can. uh, Right now, we are in a shift to AI disseminating the information that haven't been that you had to previously Google it, right?
Mm.
Now you don't even have to. Now it's just at your fingertip. I don't know what's your opinion on AI, but even before Google, it was quite different. That's when I kind of started listening to Lyle McDonald, listening, not listening, reading. He
Mm.
wasn't a talker. It might be interesting, or some people might ask this question, and I should come clear on this, that I did an interview with my Lyle McDonald, and I took that interview down from YouTube because Lyle got how would I say, allergy to longevity, which is my main topic. And I thought that would be the best if I take that off. Anyhow, I wanted to ask you about what kind of subcultures, what kind of people on the internet do you associate yourself with?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily in certain camps of people, as in like I'm considered a peer of those. Um, I don't have a whole lot of friends on YouTube, let's say, um, but I could tell you who I like to listen to. So from like the health perspective, I really like the likes of Peter Attia. I don't agree with everything that they would say. Um, I like him. I think he explains things well, and he is quite balanced in his views. I would say another YouTuber that's quite well known is a guy called Dr. Mike. It's not Dr. Mike Israel, but it's an American doctor called
Hmm.
Dr. Mike. I really like the way that he explains things. Um, and he's a very, very good interviewer, and it's easy to listen to his stuff. And another one that I like to listen to is an author called Mark Manson. I followed him for a long time, and just because the way that he explains things, he doesn't talk about health or anything like that, but he talks about like psychology and things like productivity and self worth and all of these things. And it's the way that he communicates. I really enjoy listening to his stuff. I would say they're probably the some of the main things that I people that I would listen to. I don't really listen to a whole lot of podcasts anymore. I've listened to a lot of Lyle McDonald podcasts myself. I think he's very knowledgeable, but just there's so much now that it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what's your main focus in nutrition, exercise? Is there anything else?
I'd say my main focus and what I try help people with is kind of turn the science into practical application with an emphasis on the practical part. Because I think with a lot of the health experts and pseudo experts as well, I think there's a lot of emphasis on things that are not really going to move the needle in terms of what actually help people. Going into the details and the very minute specifics that are interesting to listen to and are obviously topics that people want to hear about, but often they're like novel or just a distraction from actually what really makes sense. So for me, it's helping people make sustainable changes, and longevity is definitely one. But I would say on the topic of longevity, I think it's more about focusing on the practical things where we have a lot of solid evidence rather than what would be the word, not gym bro, but biohacky kind of things.
Yeah, let's go practical with it for the rest of
Sure.
this episode. My main line of work is in an emerging new industry, longevity as a sport. People are competing with each other against these biological aging clocks, on these biological aging clocks, who can get better at them. And as time goes on, better and better biological aging clocks are created, which is basically an attempt to create a metric of how healthy someone. I guess that's how you could imagine biological aging clocks. But I'm also so this created a new type of people called longevity athletes,
Mm.
right? Now, my question to you is if you would if you would coach a longevity athlete, then what would be the main pillars of things that you would focus on with the person?
Sure. Yeah, and I'm familiar with the term and how they track it with the kind of the Hovart clocks and the DNA methylation and things like that. Brian Johnson and a few others. I would say that the main pillars are one is just overall body fat, right? So there's just being excessively overweight is just it's just objectively true that it's just associated with higher all-cause mortality risk. So, of part of longevity is obviously staying alive, right? So, reducing body fat levels. The other
With
one then,
nutrition and exercise, or
yeah,
anything else matters here?
a combination of nutrition and exercise, of course, and then in relation to that is okay your physical fitness. So VO2 max. Now there are some. It's not just necessarily running more or doing more cardio because there's different things that impact VO2 max, such as your muscle mass and your body fat levels and your genetics. But getting as fit as you practically can, focusing on practical, going from a low to moderate level of fitness has a much greater impact than going from the top 5% out to the top one, even though it might require a ton more effort to go from top five to top one. That's all diminishing returns. And then the other would be looking at someone's cardiovascular health, cardiometabolic health. So looking at their apolipoprotein B levels, which is the level of atherogenic plaque buildup in their arteries, because heart disease is the number one cause of death worldwide. So, mitigating that as much as possible by getting that number low. And then, of course, the metabolic part of that would be mainly looking at your blood sugar levels. And that is going to be heavily tied into your fitness levels and also your body fat levels. However, the lipids part or the apolipoprotein B, that can be still high even if you are fit and you are lean. That will definitely improve. But they're ones. And then, of course, with diet, it would be, I forgot to mention, obviously, lifting weights is important. Um, it's hard to put a hard number on that because it's difficult to measure in a population like you're not getting a lot of people in to do deadlifts and squats and seeing what's the risk associated with your squat number, but lifting a couple of times a week. And then with diet, it would be looking at your fruits and vegetable intake, your overall calorie intake, and your protein intake. It would making sure that people have a well balanced diet. I think they're probably the main things. Of course, harder to measure, but looking at your mental health is obviously important as well. That's a little bit more difficult. I'm not sure if these longevity athletes measure these specifically, because it's easy to measure your blood pressure. It's harder to measure your overall sense of well-being, although there are metrics that you can look at, like depression scales and things like that.
All right, all right. So, um, let's let's start with movement here. What would you put the person on? You said weight training. Is that the only thing you would do with them?
Specifically looking at longevity, yeah, weight training, maybe some mobility exercises, but again, I think it really comes down to what's the person's goal. If it's just purely longevity, I think the mobility aspect really depends on what do you need to be mobile enough to do. So you don't need to necessarily be able to do the splits or something like that, right? It's maybe cool, but it's not necessarily going to help you live longer. Um, but weight training a couple times a week, and it's hard to give specific recommendations if the goal is just general health. You could probably say 60 to 90 minutes total per week would probably be sufficient. You're not going to become a bodybuilder by doing that, but if the goal is just to muscle mass and maintenance, you're going to be able to do that. And would more muscle necessarily lead to greater longevity up to a certain fat-free mass index? There doesn't seem to be a improvement. And then at what cost? If you're spending 10 hours a week in the gym, what are you giving up to do that? So that's what I do in the weight training. And then the cardio really is, that's where you probably where most people I find can spend the most amount of time, is actually doing more cardio.
So, cardio or VO2 max training. My understanding is cardio means something like steady state cardio. You walk for a very long time, kind of slowly, or fast walking, basically.
Yeah,
But if you're doing VO2 max training, then you have to do some much more stuff that makes your lung work hard,
sure.
right?
Yeah. So when I say cardio training, I mean like cardiovascular training. So it's training your cardiovascular system. So that can include all types of
Ah, I see.
exercise, right? But yeah, I think so. One thing with some of the with podcasts and stuff like that, you might hear snippets of this is the best method for increasing your VO2 max, and one that I hear a lot is the Norwegian 4x4 method, where you do, I think it's 4 minutes off and 4 minute rest, or something along that lines. And that certainly will increase your aerobic capacity. So you have different energy systems, aerobic and anaerobic, and VO2 max is essentially your upper aerobic capacity. Because if your cardiovascular system works better, you're going to live longer, right? Your heart works better, your lungs, your endothelial system. But when we're looking at actual practical long term VO2 max, you're not going to be able to get that up high enough over the long term without getting burnt out or getting injured by just doing these 4x4 methods. Well, you might look at a research study and say that, okay, in 6 weeks or 8 weeks, however long these specific studies, where it did have a superior impact, we're looking at those who have the greatest and highest, not who have increased the shortest and the highest in a short amount of time. What we're looking at, the biggest indicator of VO2 max is actually just volume of training. So like just a volume of easy training, because you can't do high intensity all the time and get enough work in, because you just get injured or burnt out. So when we're looking at, okay, who are the fittest people on the planet, right? Well, you're looking at, like Jesse, for example, elite marathon runners. If you have a higher VO2 max, you'll be faster. The number one thing that's associated with faster marathon time is, when we're looking at like Kenyan athletes, I believe they're Kenyan, African anyway, is overall volume of training. And then the second um, correlate is number of easy miles. So that means basically how a lot of easy training. It's obviously relatively speaking easy for them would probably be very hard for me, but easy in terms of are they just doing easy work? So just getting in more and more work. And you're probably talking people who are doing like, 15, 20 hours plus of cardio a week. And of course, these are elite athletes. Um, it's not practical for the average person, right? If you're not getting paid to do this, but that's if you want a higher VO2 max, it's going to be down to the overall amount of work that you can get in without getting injured.
All right. Does strength training or resistance training matters here or not? No,
Sure,
I
yeah,
mean for VO2 max. Like,
yeah. There
is
is
your
an
claim
impact of
extend to that as well?
yeah, it is, but not as much, right? So your VO2 max will be also associated with fat-free mass. So the more muscle you have, the greater your VO2 max is, and this is where it can kind of be difficult to say this is the exact perfect because if you look at the people who are the highest VO2 max, they just basically just do cardio, like in distance endurance runners, cyclists and things. Well, maybe they do a little bit of weight training, but most runners don't do a lot of weightlifting, a little bit to prevent injury, but they're not trying to build muscle. So you could say, well, it is associated with increased VO2 max or one determinant, but it's almost like as you get the law of specificity, as you get better at one thing, you're going to sacrifice something else. So probably some natural bodybuilders have a high VO2 max, even though they may not do a lot of cardio because they're lean and they've got a lot of muscle. I'm not sure about the enhanced bodybuilders because I'm not sure how the physiology of the steroids and stuff impacts your cardiovascular health, but I would say there's probably not as high.
Would you give a longevity athlete some anabolic steroids?
I don't personally think so. Well, first of all, I'm obviously not a medical doctor, but I think the steroids just to build muscle, I think that's where you're starting to when the measure becomes the goal, it's no longer a good measure. Where you just say, okay, more muscle is associated with the longevity, therefore the goal is just more muscle. But more so the fact that if we're just talking, there's not a whole lot of research on different types of steroids because one, there a lot of countries they're illegal. Two, it's not ethical to be doing something illegal, and three, a lot of them or most of them are not made for humans. So if you look at testosterone, which obviously is naturally produced hormone and given to people who have low testosterone, there are side effects to this. So it's associated with certain risks of cancer in men. Is associated with higher levels of blood pressure, and it's also associated with increased hypertrophy of the heart, so increased heart function. So if your heart is getting bigger, it has to work harder, so it's not going to necessarily last as long. So I don't think steroids is necessarily something that I would personally recommend. That at least from my knowledge, that is would be helpful for living longer. It might make you bigger, well, it would make you bigger in the short term and perform better, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily helpful in the long term for health.
Okay. So I heard you say protein and veggies and fruits. Is that the main thing people should pay attention to here, or is there anything else on the same level here? Like, should I pay attention to not eat, let's say, processed foods, or where does the food is coming from?
Well, first of all, I think like the reason there's so many health issues is because people don't follow the public health guidelines for the most part in terms of health. Right? So people will often say that, well, the guy everyone's overweight, and the problem is the guidelines of the government or whatever is making people fat and sick. When in reality, very few people, follow the guidelines. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head now, but in the US, I believe, from what I recall, only something like the average US adult only eats like one piece of fruit a day. Um, and they consume something like one piece of one serving of vegetables a day as well. Um, they overconsume saturated fat, which is associated with increased heart disease through increases in cholesterol levels. They eat way too much salt, which is directly correlated with higher blood pressure, which is one of the main factors for heart disease. So I think when I talk about practical, the reason that I often don't like to focus too much on the very specific nuances is because people are not even doing the basic stuff right. Right. So when I work with clientele, like very rarely they're doing everything perfectly. Maybe I don't know if I've ever experienced anyone doing everything perfectly, but I think that the main thing is for most people is eating more plants. So fruit, and in that I include like seeds, nuts, legumes, veggies, fruits, these kind of foods, and then and making sure that they're not eating too much in general, as in not having an excessive amount of calories, because that comes back to the body fat thing, right? You eat too much food over a long enough period, you gain body fat. Um, with the processed foods, it is. I think this is where I think I like to be a bit more practical, because processing means something has just gone through a process. So I know that there will be people who say we should just avoid all processed foods, but like that's open to massive interpretation. Like whey protein is processed. Everything basically that we eat goes through a process. So unless you're growing everything at home and cooking it from scratch, including all your meat and everything else, your nut butters, and everything is technically processed. So that's why when you say should I eat processed or should I eat clean or not clean, it's very open to interpretation. So I'd say,
Some of these people even grow their own food at home.
yeah, yeah, I wish I could do that. I don't have I don't even have grass in my back garden. I have artificial grass. But yeah, I think if people could focus on minimally processed food for the most part, or the majority of their diet, and limiting ultra processed fast foods, I think most people will know, what foods are relatively healthy, right? If you line 10 people up against the wall, they're going to know that, like, okay, a Big Mac from McDonald's is probably something you should have frequently, and I probably should eat more fruits and vegetables. I think most people kind of know that, but then you get into the more granular detail where some people will say, well, you shouldn't eat processed foods. And then they're also selling supplements, which are obviously heavily processed, right? So it just becomes a little bit up in the air of like, what, this doesn't really make any too much sense.
Oh, one thing about that you just said is that most people know what's healthy and what isn't healthy. It's not an information issue. One thing that I started to do a year ago is that I crazily simplified all my diet tracking, and all I'm tracking right now is that did I eat healthy yesterday or not? And healthy is by my own value judgment. What does healthy mean?
Mm,
And it works. Like you wouldn't
yeah.
guess. But I see you. I heard you in one of your videos talking about something similar. Is that it's not really information that people are lacking, but other things. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, like human behavior is very complex, right? So often people think we're just algorithms or robots that can just do what we want to do, but we're sentient beings. We have emotions. We have ambivalence. We can want two opposing things at the same time. You can want to eat healthy and go for a walk. You can also want at exactly the same time to want to watch a Netflix and eat some chocolate, right? You can have those two beliefs at once. And we don't always make the most logical and rational decision all the time. And I think more and more information and complexity doesn't necessarily help everybody. It definitely helps some people that can just execute, and are very just, they're very self-driven and self-motivated, and are able to follow through. But a lot of people struggle with that, and they often forget that there's no solutions in life, just trade-offs. So they kind of forget that. Oh, they tell themselves they're going to do all these things, and what I see from a practical perspective is people saying they're going to eat really well and they're going to not drink any alcohol and they're going to not snack, and then they forget that actually at the weekend I like to have a pizza with my wife, or like I drink a glass of wine, or my wife has opened up a packet of potato chips at the weekend and I ate some, and they feel bad about it, but they forget that food is not just fuel, it's also social and cultural and brings connection. So it's difficult to just eat perfectly healthy all the time if that means that other parts of your life are going to be impacted and other people are going to be impacted as well.
Are you struggling with it as well?
I wouldn't say I struggle with it personally, but I do find that it's a challenge. Sometimes I would like to eat better, but then I have a friend's wedding to go to, and or I have a vacation where I would like to. I don't drink a whole lot of alcohol, but like I want to feel fresh the next day, but I also want to enjoy a cocktail before I go to a concert with my wife. So there's trade-offs, and I think as long as you're happy with the trade-offs and it's a conscious choice, then it's I think then that's just something that you need to be at peace with. The same with I think anything in life. And everybody would not everybody, but a lot of people would like to have lots and lots of money and have a business that brings in financial freedom, but not everyone wants to put in the hours and the risk of failing and the long nights and fractured relationships and lack of social life. It's not something I want to do. So it's I think a lot of time people don't realize how hard change is as well. And there's different components to change according to behavior psychology that people don't realize. They think it's just a knowledge.
What supplement stack would you give to this longevity athlete?
I would say probably creatine monohydrate, potentially vitamin D. I would say potentially citrulline malate for its impacts on blood pressure.
Tell me
Uh,
about that. That's new.
yeah, so citrulline malate, it's a vasodilator. So people take it for the gym. In endurance sports, it can help improve performance there. But one also, well, side effect, or it works through the same pathway through vasodilation, is it will reduce your blood pressure. And I think the lower to an extent that your blood pressure can get without fainting, of course, the lower risk you're going to have of cardiovascular events. So even people who have like normal blood pressure could do with reducing it ever so slightly. I mean, 40 something percent of, and a lot of data is just from the US. So when I quote US, it's because it's a lot of data from there. But 40 something percent of US adults have hypertension or high blood pressure. So it could be that. Then maybe potentially magnesium supplement. There's some maybe evidence for skin on. I mean, I don't know how many points you get as a longevity expert, longevity
Oh, it's
athlete.
very important. That's
Okay,
very important.
yeah. So I've seen recently that some meta-analysis recently have shown that there's no effect, but when you look at the stronger powered studies, there does seem to be some effect on collagen. On skin elasticity and things like that. I've taken it on or off. I don't. It's not that I don't care about my skin, but it's just like it's not like a huge important factor to me. Maybe it should be, but I don't. I take it on and off. The fish oils is maybe a questionable one, but I think if you're someone that wants to
Oh, how
maximize your
so?
lunch, yeah.
How so?
How
Why is
so?
that a
Because
question?
yeah, because fish oil usually seems to be a staple or something that's like you have to consume it. But when you look at the data, especially of people who eat fatty fish, there doesn't really seem to be any benefits of it of consuming fish oils if you consume enough fatty fish, so kind of cup to 3 servings per week. And I think if you're looking to optimize your health, you should be trying to get most of your food, your nutrients from food, not because not because the nutrient itself is superior, but because of the when you have certain nutrients in the food matrix, as in they're intertwined with other ingredients and minerals and vitamins and polyphenols and things like that, that they can have synergistic effects, some that we probably still don't even know or aware of in science. So consuming food in its natural, consuming nutrients in their natural state, I think is probably going to be superior if possible. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I think anything would be a blanket recommendation. I know there's some in the especially longevity space, they're looking at NMN and these kind of resveratrol, which I believe there's some controversy around those. I do follow some longevity experts who research it on X or Twitter. Charles M. Brenner, I believe, is one I follow. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. So I think I probably wouldn't recommend that one just based on what I've read on that. I don't think I'd specifically recommend any other ones. Maybe potentially a multivitamin, but with that said, if you're consuming a wide variety of nutrients in your diet, then there wouldn't necessarily you should be having you should be at optimal levels for those nutrients. With the caveat that we don't really know what optimal levels are, because with certain nutrients we only have the RDA, which is the lower amount to avoid disease state, and then the upper safe limit. And the optimal seems to be somewhere in the middle, when we don't really know exactly what that is for most nutrients.
Let me give you an idea about the dedication of some of these people. The person who is leading right now the longevity World Cup is Mike Lastgarten. He has a PhD. What he's doing with his nutrition is that he's for over a decade, perhaps multiple decades, he's writing down exactly what he's eating down to the micronutrients.
Mm.
He's tracking to that level of granularity, and he's doing um, I believe one blood test every month. Right? Imagine that.
Yeah.
And then what he's doing is that he's calculating correlations and p-values on his own data based on diet input and the blood tests output. And every time that he notices something, he's tweaking it.
Mm.
So is like mind blowing, the level of dedication that I don't think bodybuilders are doing it this
No.
go to this extreme. I'm saying this because what he's doing is that he's trying to not take any supplements, because he's able to get his blood levels somehow with this statistical trickery of his diet. But I had an idea that, this is really like how Brian Johnson would say, is that every calorie must fight for its life. If that's the case, if we take that seriously, then wouldn't it be that you should be preferring the supplement form of any micronutrients and anything, the supplement form of it, take the supplements, and then you can choose other kinds of food. So let's take fish oil. If I prefer fish oil, then I don't have to eat fish. You
Mm.
see the point? Then I have a lot more calories to allocate to other things than fish.
I know. I get what you're saying. Like uh, the calorie to like nutrient ratio or whatever. Like
Does it
you
make
get
any sense?
yeah, so that you get more nutrients per calorie by taking the fish oil versus eating the fish, because you don't have to consume the whole salmon or whatever, and you can use those calories elsewhere.
Yeah, and I don't know about this mercury stuff, but that's something that people
Yeah.
are afraid of.
One thing that I heard a long time ago from who's actually a professional bodybuilder. He has a PhD in nutrition as well. His name's Eric Helms. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but I heard him say it at least, is you don't necessarily get a special star for going way above your requirements for certain nutrients. So if you have, for example, vitamin C, and what's the upper limit? It's quite high, probably the safe, because it's water soluble. But if you're consuming 10 times the amount of the required amount, you don't get a special gold star, he said. So just consuming more of the nutrient dense foods isn't necessarily better than consuming enough. But I take your point that maybe makes sense if you don't have a lot of calories and you're deficient in something else. would make sense to allocate it elsewhere. But of course, we do need to making sure that you're not malnourished as well, and eating enough calories is really important, because you can have something called relative energy deficiency, uh, which is not necessarily calorie deficit, but essentially where your body is you're eating way too little to support proper biological function. It's common in endurance athletes, but it's also prevalent in the population of people who undereat as well, where you just okay, you're not losing weight, but your body has really kind of shut off the lights, so to speak, and turned down the energy usage just to stay alive. And I think that's we see that in sports, how that manifests in women is they lose their menstrual cycle. With men, you have higher levels of depression, and testosterone really reduces. And I think I think when I was following Brian Johnson, I think that's one of the reasons why he had to use, for a period at least, testosterone replacement, because he's not too old, but his calories were so low, and that his body fat was so low that was, not necessarily in the healthy range, that he had to use exogenous testosterone to keep it high artificially.
I have one last question about the supplements before we move on from them. Is that creatine is getting a lot of press lately.
Mm.
Let me just illustrate what's going on in my subculture here. Is that Dave Pascoe is currently taking. He's one of the most well-known longevity athlete. He's currently taking 10 grams of creatine a day, and he's thinking of taking 20, upping it to 20, right? I'm not talking about some kind of loading phase or anything like that. It's 10 gram for till the rest of your life, right? Or 20 gram till the rest of your life. And the reason is because there are some new waves. I don't know if you heard about that, but regarding your brain, you might need a lot more creatine than we usually were we taking as bodybuilders. 5 gram, right? That was the number that we were gonna take forever to the rest of our life. So do you know what am I talking about? What are these news, and do they even make sense? Should I take 20 gram of creatine a day?
Sure, yeah. So I do, yeah, I'm aware of it and I'm seeing it. I think the data is still emerging, right? So, like, creatine is one of the most researched supplements, if not the most, I think maybe behind caffeine, on the planet. And I believe there's some research showing maybe potentially mechanisms to reduce dementia, and other kind of cognitive disorders. Um, would I personally recommend it? I don't. I think it's safe enough if you can handle it on your stomach. 'Cause some people have gastric issues with consuming it, but would I say this is definitely going to be something that you need to do? That's going to definitely have a positive impact on your well being. I would say I'm not strongly convinced, but I understand that people who are trying to do absolutely everything they can, it probably makes sense for them to give it a go, because it seems likely that it's fairly safe supplement. With other supplements, when you're starting to do mega dosages, it can be questionable whether actually maybe this is actually having a negative impact in the long term, because that data just it doesn't exist. But I think with creatine, it's probably is relatively safe. Um, I don't take more than say 5 grams myself per day. Some days I even forget to take it. Um, and I feel like personally I don't respond in terms of the muscle or strength side of things. I've taken it probably since I was 16, so whatever how many years that is, 18 years or 17 years, and I've never really seemed to notice a positive or negative benefit from starting or stopping it. But I just take it anyway because it's safe, it's relatively cheap, and there may be some cognitive benefits.
Right, and it's also something that you cannot measure in your
Yeah.
perhaps you can measure it, but it's not available for consumers usually.
Mm.
One of the things that people hold on the same level as fitness and nutrition would be sleep in this subculture, right? Would you put sleep on the same level that you should be optimizing the shit out of your sleep, or that's just not as important as fitness and nutrition is?
Yeah, I think it's really important, to be honest, and I think it's like none of them are really dispensable. Like if you want to optimize your health, you have to do all of them, right? It's not one or the other. Or you do one but not the other. And I think sleep is extremely important. There are some people that can, they say they're fine by 5 hours of sleep or something like that. But the reality is, just because you are surviving on 5 hours doesn't mean that that's necessarily what's good for long term health. It's associated with increased muscle mass, also increased decreased muscle mass or muscle loss, sleep deprivation, higher levels of mental not mental illnesses, but like cognitive decline, levels of depression, lower testosterone. So I think it's probably the one that most people know what to do, because it's just, for a lot of people, it's just go to bed earlier for a lot of people and avoid stimulants. But it's probably one of the hardest ones for people to actually do, um, for several reasons. But I think, especially in the connected world with digital media, and we're always bad news and dopamine hits are at our fingertips. It can be sometimes difficult for people to switch off at nighttime. So I've experienced that with a lot of clients that I've worked with, where it's very difficult for them to sleep, not because they don't want to sleep or because they drink too much coffee, but because they find it difficult to relax or switch off, or they're stressed. And that's where it can be a challenge for people, because that might require cognitive behavioral therapy or something like that.
All right, let's move on to some extra stuff. I don't know if you know about these things, but let's say breath work, red light therapy, cold plunge, sauna, hyperbaric chambers.
Mm,
Oh, okay. So which is bullshit and which isn't?
sure. I don't think any of them are bullshit, to be honest. I think some people will probably overemphasize the benefits of them. Have
Which
tried
is
them all.
not important for general health, not
Yeah,
relevant.
I think they can all have positive benefits. Um, I only did a cold plunge on Monday evening.
Comparable to workout,
I don't think so, right? So I mean, like, I've seen that lots of different claims. There's definitely sauna, and I don't know if you mentioned sauna, but sauna seems to be associated with lower all cause mortality, and even reduced blood pressure, even though you're told not to use the sauna if you have high blood pressure. But I used a sauna and a cold plunge on Monday. I felt great after doing it. How will that influence my longevity? It's really hard for me. It's hard to quantify that, but I think I feel great. I feel great after it, and I sleep well. If that has some sort of meaningful impact. I'm not tracking all of these things. Like, I'm not tracking, I did this on and I slept this month and I correlate that. Maybe there are people who do that, but I find that, if something makes you feel good and it's not harming your health, I think that's positive. I recently only started breath work, maybe 2 months ago, with the breath work facilitator. I can't quantify the benefits of that, but honestly, I felt really, really good. I felt very relaxed.
what
And
kind of breath work did you do?
it was called conscious connected breath work, um, where I'm not an expert on breath work, but apparently it's not as upregulating as something like the Wim Hof method, but it's more downregulating. But
You're
essentially,
holding your breath, slowing it down,
yeah, you
hyperventilating. What?
you're
What?
you're you're breathing heavily, for taking deep breaths for a long period of time, and then some breath
Oh
holds,
yeah.
and then you slow it down. Where you have this,
Uh huh.
you have a quite a sense of well, my personally was a sense of euphoria, and then lots of tranquility and relaxation. And I was honestly skeptical about this breath work. Of course, have seen it, especially the rise in like things like Wim Hof, but I was not that it wouldn't work. The only other breath work I had done prior to that was, some mindfulness with like a headspace or something like that, where it's breathing, but it's just for being more calm in the moment and when maybe feeling a bit anxious or something. But this was something that I was shocked with how impactful it was. I'm not aware of the research in terms of how that might impact your longevity, but I all I can say is that I was feeling significantly less stressed, and if you can feel less stressed, that will have a positive impact on your overall longevity. The red light therapy, I think this is probably not as beneficial as maybe it's made out to be, especially by the company selling it. But I do find that I found some benefits. I dug a little bit into the research, especially when I was looking more into Brian Johnson. But I think one issue is the standardization of the quality of some of the machines that you buy. Like I have no idea how to measure if that's a good quality. I've read online from some of them are cheap from Asia or China that are not actually that they're not they're not actually up to the standards that they say they are. I think there's some potential benefits for skin health as well, but I'm not sure in terms of like actual going beyond the layer of like the dermis into the actual into the cells of like the muscles or the mitochondria, etc. I'm not overly familiar with that. And I think the main reason I don't really focus on that is even myself, I'm trying to work on the basics more. Like I could still lower my cholesterol more. I could still lower my blood pressure more. I could still get fitter. And I feel like we only have a certain amount of headspace to deal with. Like I work more than probably was healthy. Like if I wanted to optimize my health, I would work maybe 2 hours a day or something, right? But I have to work, right? And I'm not outside as much as I'd like to be, but I have to work. So I think there's only a certain amount of things that you can focus on. So I choose to, okay, maybe once every 2 weeks I might do a sauna and cold plunge, and maybe it will be more beneficial if I could do it every day. But I simply can't because I have to drive there and don't have the time. A hyperbaric chamber, I'm honestly not too familiar with the long term. I know it's important, and I know that people use it too when they have like the bends from coming from diving too fast, coming up from diving too quickly, when they don't acclimate, so they don't get clots in their blood. But I'm not familiar with the long term benefits of that. And I think coming back to my philosophy of practical, I don't even know where I could find a hyperbaric chamber within 20 kilometers of where I live. Never mind get access to it, you know. And I'm not sure how expensive they are. I'm thinking probably maybe 50k euros plus.
Sounds like a business idea.
Yeah, yeah, could be.
All right.
Have you used one yourself?
Well, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
But not like properly, just 4 times trying it out in a retreat and then
Oh, there
to
you
go back to real life.
go. And how was it?
It's you feel
Yeah.
it, but it's like you have no idea what it's doing, right? I mean, I have a red light therapy device, a full body, and I'm using it regularly for years now, and I can't notice anything.
Mm.
It's like,
Well, see,
should I
that
be?
I think that is the thing and it's the problem with some supplements, especially the supplements that people take pre-workout, is that they want to feel something.
Mm,
So if you want to make an effective supplement for going to the gym, it may not have caffeine in it because if you're having caffeine too late, you're not going to sleep, and that's going to have a net negative impact on your overall health. But it might make you feel all jacked up and wired. But if you're putting in stuff that people don't feel, then they're going to say, "Oh, I don't feel anything," even though it might improve your performance. When we're looking at research, it might improve your performance by 5%, which is for the average person, they don't care that much. For a professional athlete, they say, well, a nitrate shots or of concentrated beetroot juice, that improves my performance. But you're not going to feel it, but you will see it on the podium or the numbers or the time to exhaustion and things like that. And I think that is a thing with a lot of devices and things that people buy, but they don't feel anything or they don't specifically see anything, is that they find it hard to correlate benefits, even though there may be benefits with that actual device or that therapy or that supplement, because there's other things that they have also done in their life during that period as well. With the red light specifically for me, I noticed that even if it's placebo, when my muscles are sore in my calves because I'm doing running, that if I sit here on the desk and put it behind I notice that they feel maybe a little bit better. And it could be 100% placebo. And sometimes I sit here with it and I close the blinds in the morning and I do some breathing with like Headspace or a Calm app, and I close my eyes and it makes me feel like I'm at the beach. And it's quite a relaxing way to start the day rather than it's raining outside. I just start working. Hard to quantify again the benefit of this long term. But my father used to be a physiotherapist. He passed away, but he had a clinic, and he said, rubbing somebody and giving them the massage, it doesn't really help them in the long term. Like, it doesn't help their injuries, but it makes them feel better in the short term. And sometimes that's all we need to do is just, make, if we can feel better for a week, that's good, and not everything has to be a long-term solution.
That's well said. What's one thing that you strongly believe to be the case, but very few people agree with you on?
Oh, that's a tough question. That if we didn't eat meat, we would be healthier. If you ate a plant-based diet only, it would be healthier. A lot of people wouldn't agree with me, but there's a lot of people who would agree. I'm not a vegan, and I had beef for lunch, right? So I don't always do what I know is best because I'm human and I have preferences and things like that. But there's evidence that like the portfolio diet. So if someone said, "What's the best diet for longevity?" I would say the portfolio diet by Dr. David Jenkins that was developed just to reduce um, ApoB levels or LDL levels, and it's heavily focused on tofu and corn and soy protein and plant sterols. Not necessarily the tastiest diet or one that I won't really enjoy following, but I think when I ever say that, people lose their shit. They don't, especially people who want to build muscle, because they just think meat, protein. Um, if you don't eat meat, you're not like you're not alpha male. Um, but it's just that's what I just feel is objectively true, and I know a lot of people would not be happy with that sentiment. Yeah.
Adam McDonald, it was a privilege and a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me on. It was great.